Testing. Check 1 2.
Speakers either though.
Where's the?
You're in our e-edition.
Okay, where do I need to go?
TelegraphHerald.com, the website.
Okay.
It's not at the very top. It's right there. That's weird. It should just be the live. Okay, we're good. Yeah. It's weird that I grabbed that still from last week.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Testing 1 2. Test 1 2. Is that what? No, it's fine. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Testing 1 2. You not hearing that? I can hear it.
Oh, you hear it there? Oh, then it's probably on my sheet.
And that's the other thing. Paul, I remember Paul saying that the last time he heard the mics from the cameras.
Yeah, we had to because we didn't have this. Yeah.
I just got sound through this.
Oh, you can mute these.
So good.
Sure, we weren't getting audio from the computer. Test. We're good.
All right, we're going to start. We're going to start in. We're going to go ahead and get started here in about a minute. So if anybody who's in the back who needs to move up, now would be a great time to do that. Ready to? All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Bob Woodward, and I am the publisher at TH Media, Telegraph Herald, here in Dubuque, and this is our 7th and not quite final edition of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series, focusing on a number of very important topics. Tonight's topic is transportation. First, I need to thank some people. In addition to you all for coming tonight, I'd like to thank our partners in this whole project, the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. Nancy, Bobby, Mary Jo, Clara, Jeff, Alex, everybody has been phenomenal in working with us, and they are providing some of the data component to this process and also some of the follow-on to-do and action opportunities after tonight's conversation. I also want to thank all of our sponsors. We have 7 businesses, and I will tell you this. We asked 7 businesses to sponsor this series. Every single one of them said yes. And so we're very grateful for that, and they're the ones who are making this possible. I'll mention who they are, and then you can save your applause to the end. We're very grateful to Green State Credit Union, Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, Northeast Iowa Community College, Hodge Companies, Cottingham and Butler, the Dubuque Area Chamber of Commerce, and our featured presenter and sponsor tonight, John Deere. Please help me thank all of them. Thank you. We're going to talk tonight about a number of aspects. We've talked about education. We've talked about safety. We have talked about workforce. We've talked about lots of different topics. Tonight's topic is conversation, and transportation. And transportation is crucial to just about anything you want to do. You may have heard the old joke. They tend to use it out in the East, and they pick on the Mainers, and they say, you can't get there from here. And it's kind of a joke or a colloquialism about, some places far away, hard to get to, or possibly impossible to get to. And for some people with transportation challenges, literally, you can't get there from here. It's not a joke. It's very serious. That could be a job, whether it's a single worker with no vehicle or whether it's 2 or 3 workers with only one. It could be someone who lives just inside the 2-mile boundary and can't get a school bus to school, but they're too far away to walk or bike. It could be someone who urgently needs health care and they can't get to a health care provider, hospital, urgent care, or clinic. It could also be just as simple as needing transportation to go get a basic necessity like food, going to the grocery store, something like that. So how many of us, and this is not a show of hands situation, this is a rhetorical question. How many of us have multiple cars? How many of us have 3-car garages in our homes? How many of us drive to work every day by ourselves? Many people want or need alternatives to that, and so transportation is the challenge. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. I want to make it clear, we're not going to be able to hit on every topic and every aspect of it. We're going to try and get to as many as we can as possible. We want your participation. On the tables, you will see some 4x6 index cards and some pens. If you have questions for our panelists tonight, feel free to jot those down. We will have people who will be collecting those and sharing them with our facilitators. For some people, it's not always necessarily needed. It's also preference. Maybe you would prefer to walk somewhere. Maybe you would prefer to bike somewhere, but you don't feel like you can do it safely. We'll talk about a lot of those issues tonight as well. So before we get started, one of the things we want to do is we want to start with some data. And we're going to talk a little bit about transportation challenges and some of the issues by demographic in our community. And before we start with that, though, I also want to introduce our keynote speaker from John Deere and our featured speaker and sponsor tonight. Please help me welcome Mark Dixon.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Good, yep. So I'll keep this short. I think the information that is the best is, I've been to a few of these, is always in the panel and getting the discussion going in the questions. So make sure you ask some questions. So again, I'm Mark Dixon. I'm the general manager at John Deere Dubuque Works. And on behalf of the employees of John Deere and, of course, the fact that we're a sponsor, we would really like to welcome you to this great event, the DEI event focused on the transportation options here in Dubuque. Thank you to the TH Media. Thanks to the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque for developing this series. It's just been a great event. I know one of them, it was overflowing and conversations were great, and I think I spent as much time here after the event as I did during the event, so they've been awesome. I think we recognize that there's many challenges in our community with transportation, and when it comes to transportation options of all ethnic backgrounds, okay? I'm looking forward to the information that Alex is going to share. I look forward to the conversation that we can have here tonight. And I'm anxious for a spirited conversation. You know, the transportation needs to be more accessible. It needs to be more safe. And maybe a little bit off script, when I think about safety, many probably don't know, but at John Deere, we have about 300 semi-trucks come in and out of that facility every day. And a bunch of them like to come across the bridge from Wisconsin, and it's not very convenient for them to get to John Deere, being north, if they don't go down Central. But we can't, that's not safe, right? It's not the kind of neighborhood for this area of Dubuque to send, I don't know how many, maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 semis a day, just from us, let alone others, down a nice neighborhood. So we're actually supporting it, and it's going to cost us probably 6 figures to send our trucks around. But it's the right thing to do. And I think that's the kind of thing that we have to step up and support here in Dubuque. So we need to make it more safe. People need to get to their jobs. They need to do the things to live a comfortable life, including grocery stores and getting medical services and going to places and exploring opportunities across our great city. So again, thank you for taking the time to be here. I think this is really important, and let's have a great event, and I'd like to bring back Bob. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Nancy and I were just remarking as we're listening to Mark talk, you know, John Deere has been a leader in this area, and they've also been a leader not only in where their semi-traffic goes, but also in working to help facilitate transportation for some of their workers who might not have that. So, Mark, we thank you for your leadership. And I think another takeaway from the comment I just heard a second ago is they don't have to do this. They're doing it because they want to and because it's the right thing to do. And so I hope we can all take Mark's words and sort of embrace that and try and make decisions and channel resources to this area because it's the right thing to do. So without further delay, I want to get to some of the data. Here to help us with that data is our partner from the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque, who's going to share a few insights on the data side, Alex Baum. Alex?
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you to John Deere. Thank you to TH Media. And thank you all to coming out here. I think this is going to be a really exciting conversation and a great way to wrap up the 7 months that we have been doing on this. It's not going to be a full wrap up, though. As Bob mentioned, we are going to be having a culmination event next month where we will be able to show all of the data, responses from the surveys and the community conversations, and talk about next steps. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but just want to put that bug in your brain right now to be thinking about that. That leads me to talking a little bit about what the structure is for this. Now, at the beginning of every month through these past 7 months, we've been focusing on a different topic, and where we've been having an expert panel and people with lived experience and presenting publicly available data. But that's only the beginning of the work that takes place. Throughout the rest of the month, we also hold community conversations and we release an online survey about that topic because getting feedback from residents is the critical part of this whole work that we're doing right now. We want to be able to hear from Dubuquers what their experience is with transportation, with public transportation, with trying to get to work. So please, we have a list of conversations and there's a QR code to the different the survey that you can take. Please take the opportunity or let other people that you know who might be interested in it to take the survey and join us for the conversations. But now let's get into the data itself. We want to start off by looking at the percent of workers who are living in the city of Dubuque and how they get to work every day. So this is the percentages between the previous equity profile and this current equity profile, the previous one we did in 2015, of how people are getting to work. So you can see on the left, we have those who drive alone in a car, truck, or van, and then all other means of transportation. And now let's break out that other means, because we've got about 80% are driving themselves alone to work. But you can see here the majority of, or the largest number for the rest are those who carpool. Then we also have working from home, walking, public transportation, bike, and taking a taxi cab. Now, really quickly, I want to call your attention here into this work from home number, because this has really skyrocketed over just the past couple of years. I think a lot of you can tell. This is for the city of Dubuque, but actually, if you take a look at our larger metro area and the surrounding area of people who might be coming to Dubuque, it's an even higher number of about 12% right now who are working from home. So this number has really shot up, and it'll be interesting to see if that continues in the future. Next, we want to take a look at what the reality is for these different types of households and how they're getting to work. So this is a list of the number of households in the city of Dubuque based on how many workers are in this. So in the top category, we have no workers in the household, 1 worker, 2 worker, or 3 or more workers. And then from the bars breaking down, kind of going from top to bottom, is listed the number of vehicles. So no vehicles, 1, 2, and 3 or more vehicles. So now when we take a look at this, I want to focus in on these 1 worker, 2 worker, and 3 more or more worker areas and highlight instances in where there are more workers than there are cars available for those households, right? So this is 3 or more workers, but there's only 2 cars or only 1 car. If you look at from the previous equity profile, that was about 8.5% of the households in Dubuque. And right now it's at about 7.8% of households have fewer cars than they do workers. And for 80% of people driving alone, that helps maybe fill in that picture of why people are using those other means of transportation. Let's also look a little bit about what industries we're talking about here. So this graph is available down on the side. You can go and look a lot more closely on it. But I want to just call out a couple of areas. So the biggest chunks of the graph are the retail trade and the education services and health and social assistance. Those are the biggest chunks who are using public transportation. This is looking at all of the workers who use public transportation. What industries do they work in? When we look at the current data, the biggest changes from the previous equity profile are in a growth of manufacturing workers who are now using public transportation. We have a larger percentage there. And then wholesale trade and transportation and warehousing and utilities. So those are kind of where we're seeing some of those changes from the previous time we did this. We also want to be able to try to disaggregate some of these numbers and talk about race and ethnicity and what the breakdown is here. Again, all this data is available on the side so you can look at it more closely. But just to call out a couple of things, first of all, we're talking about the darker number is driving yourself alone. Then we go to carpooling, public transportation, and then all other types of transportation. So when we look at our Black and Asian population, we can see that about 8% in 2021 are using public transportation. These are the largest amounts for any of our racial and ethnic groups. For comparison, the white population, about 1% uses public transportation. So just kind of an interesting breakdown. The other thing that I want to bring up is our Pacific Islander population. And you can see here, right, this is a smaller population, so these numbers might not be exact, but I think this is still illuminating the fact that it's 50% driving alone and 50% carpooling. We often think of carpooling as a very positive thing, environmentally friendly, a way to be able to get to work. The other side of that coin, though, the reality is often it is those households with fewer cars than they have workers, or possibly several households needing to utilize one vehicle in order to get to work. That increases the vulnerability of those workers, because if something happens to that one vehicle that everybody's using, it can mean a cascading effect for all of those workers who are now late to their workplaces. And then finally, for our last graph, we want to look at this broken down by income level, by poverty level. So the left bar is below the poverty, 100% of the poverty line. The middle bar is 100 to 149%, and then 150% of the poverty line and above. Let me get in really quickly here, and I just want to highlight that you can see here, I think as a lot of us would expect, the lower or the numbers closer to the poverty line utilize public transportation, carpooling, and other means of transportation a lot more than the higher income population within Dubuque. So that's a quick breakdown. Again, all of this data is available to the side, and I'm happy to have any conversations, but right now I want to turn it over to Bob so we can get to our panel discussion. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Alex. All right, I'd like to invite all of our panelists to start taking their seats up here in no particular order and introduce our facilitators. I'll also tell you that I have already started taking notes, and when we are done at the end of the evening tonight, one of our goals here is to identify some of the issues, some of the data, some of the current resources available, and also some of the unmet needs. And so I'm going to be taking notes throughout the panel presentation and come back and share with you some of the takeaways that I've got that were either important and or action steps that can be taken after the evening tonight. So to welcome our panelists, I'd like to introduce our facilitators. We have, I got your mic, Amy. Amy Gilligan, executive editor of the Telegraph Herald and TH Media, and also Anderson Sansi from the city of Dubuque. Amy and Anderson, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for being out here tonight. We've been doing this now for 7 months, and each one, it's illuminating, and we really appreciate everybody being here. So shout out to Dick and Joyce Smith. I think you've made every one, so good for you. They keep, what's bringing you back? The information?
It's both of us. They like spending time with us, and it's fun entertainment. That's what it is. For those of you who are new and this is your first time here, there are some cards on the table. We have some planned questions that we'll ask all the panelists, but you may have something that you really want to ask. So we strongly encourage you, paper, pen, write your questions, and then we'll have some people walking around with their hands up to grab those cards as well. We may not be able to get to all the questions, but we'll work hard to get those questions addressed, okay? And so we're going to start off with some introductions.
Yeah, we want to hear from the panelists. And so with this panel, some of you are here tonight because of what your job is directly related to transportation. And some of you are here from other connections, or maybe your lived experience, or how you choose to use transportation in the community. So as we go down, just introduce yourself and tell us kind of what ties you to this issue.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shirley Horseman, and I'm the Executive Director of Student Services for Dubuque Community School District. And I think it goes without saying that as a school district, transportation is very important to us. It affects our attendance, and overall it affects our academic achievement.
I'm Candace Udaly-Lobach. I am an avid walker, biker, encourage my kids to walk and bike too. But I'm also here because I have a small business and I work with small communities reviewing demographic data to help them make infrastructure decisions. And a lot of that is transportation related.
Hi, I'm Dave Clovitter with the Dubuque Community Credit Union, and I'll be talking about an employer perspective as it relates to transportation and our credit union's decision to revitalize a historic building to house about 250 employees in downtown Dubuque.
Hi, I'm Melissa Torres. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm a Duhawk at Loras College. I'm also an intern at Greater Community Foundation. I'm an impact intern, so that's how I got connected here. But since I am an out-of-state student, a college student that does not have a card, I think I'm perfect for the panel.
Ryan Nucky, City of Dubuque Transportation Services. I've been with the city for about a year and a half. In my department, we oversee the parking sector, and we also see the Dubuque Transit System, which contains both our fixed routes of the Jewel and the minibuses for the paratransit.
Andy Benko with John Deere, so I'll be talking from an employee perspective. Recently worked with Ryan on a commuter bus service that we started this past January of 2023. Also through Deere, I sit on the board of Opening Doors and also on the board for St. Vincent de Paul, so have a good perspective working with a lot of neighbors on public transportation issues and challenges.
Great, thank you very much. So all of these sessions we are trying to look at through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I want to hear from the panelists as to how you see transportation as it relates to equity, and perhaps what would a more equitable transportation system look like in our community. So anybody can start, just let's speak to that a little bit.
Colombian President Gustavo Petro said a developed country is not one where
Little louder, Melissa.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
A little closer.
A developed country is not where poor people have cars. It's where the rich people use public transportation. And I think that's what this country needs. And I was talking to Alex one day, and he was trying to convince me to stay in Dubuque after I graduated. And he was like, well, I really like Dubuque, and I feel like the change I make really stands out here because it's a small community, and I really like seeing the change I put work into. So I think Dubuque has the potential of just being the change and setting an example for the rest of the country to have a better public transportation system that helps everyone. And I do think it's an equity issue because a lot of people need to get to work or need to get out of the city just to be where they need to be. And not having that resource really sucks and has puts a strain on who you are or what you're trying to do, like being a student or just getting to work.
Do you see many students use public transportation?
Not really. I sometimes walk to work or another intern gives me a ride, but I really struggle when I want to go back home. I want to go back home to Phoenix and there's not an airport, or I didn't know there was buses until recently, but then the bus I have to take all the way to Madison, go to O'Hare, or take an Uber of over $200 to Cedar Rapids and also buy a plane ticket. So yeah.
I think what I'd add, so I've had the chance to live in Europe. If you had a chance to travel to Europe or to bigger cities, the density of the population there, dictates the need for public transportation. As you get out to the Midwest, cities like Dubuque, you've got such a spread, and the cities were developed without public transportation in mind. And so I think that's somewhat the challenge there, that in a lot of ways when I think back to people that I've worked with, Opening Doors or St. Vincent de Paul, they don't have a car. So they're forced to look for public transportation. But I can tell you what they're looking for as soon as they get some money is to buy a car and to get away from having to take public transportation. So it's kind of hard where you're trying to drive usage, and I agree with the comment there of if you can get to the point where you've got the rich and the poor people taking or using public transportation, that's a good place to get to for steady state. But I think within cities like Dubuque, you've got people looking to get away from it if they can, and that's the challenge of trying to find that happy median.
I guess for Dupaco, when we were exploring headquarters for our credit union, employee experience was at the top of the list. And we were thinking in terms of parking for our employees. And one day we left a meeting and we were leaving our Pennsylvania branch, and we saw one of our employees walking out of the building going to the bus stop. And we realized that, well, when it comes to inclusion, we're just thinking about automobile transportation, but we're not being inclusive of employees who choose to take public transportation or walk or bike. So it really opened our minds to the employee experience of going beyond just subsidizing parking, which does cost money to maintain a parking space. Meanwhile, this employee is paying for public transportation out of his own pocket instead of taking advantage of a subsidized free parking spot.
And so have you changed that model then to try to, if you don't have to get them a parking spot, to give them a stipend toward other transportation?
Yeah. When we decided to move to the Voices building, it came down to two wonderful choices for our organization. The Technology Park, which is an amazing space south of Dubuque, and then revitalizing the historic building downtown. The Technology Park is pretty much restricted to somebody having a car because there's no bus transportation, there's no bike trails out there. It's really difficult to walk. So the Voices building gave us an opportunity to be inclusive of all of those modes. And we realized that a parking spot costs money. Let's just give the money to our employees and figure out how they want to get to work. So every employee assigned to the Voices building is given a transportation stipend every month that they can use to buy a parking pass or parking permit, a bus pass, or put tires on their bike. So we empower our employees to do that. And we had no problems, no issues, and it's really enhanced the employee experience for our employees.
I want to invite Candace to jump in here to talk about this idea of what does an equitable public transportation system look like from your perspective, because you kind of threw out that question to us to say, hey, that's something we all should be thinking about. What I'm hearing is, centering people at the forefront and giving them the choice to do what's best for their situation. But what else could we do to make sure Dubuque is like other places?
Yeah, so I think often we think about transportation as like a 16-year-old being independent for the first time having a car. Oops. Okay. I think a lot of times we think of that 16-year-old getting their first car and that being independence, right? We all remember that feeling. Our kids are getting there, not mine, but maybe yours. But we forget that the first time we were independent in transportation was when we walked to our friend's house or we rode our bike to school. And I think about that a lot with regard to what equitable transportation would look like, because I'm not just thinking about the people who can drive a car. I'm trying to think about the people who don't have car as an option for any reason, right? Walking to school, biking to school, a person who's lost their license for some reason, an older person who's lost their license but wants to walk to church. I have a neighbor that does that every day. I like to think about those people and how do they access our community, and that's where my mind goes, is that like the easiest thing for them to do, the most inexpensive, because a car is expensive. 2 cars are expensive. If you can do it with 1 car, I've done it with 1 car, I have 2 children, my spouse and I both worked. We did this. It is possible, and it has saved us lots of money over the years. So I think about it from that standpoint. What is the simplest possible way we can help people get places? And a lot of times that's looking at bigger systems in place. What our school boundaries are they a truly walkable boundary? Is Loris Boulevard a barrier to some kids getting up the hill? So things like that, those like big decisions that we make, but we don't change. They're the 40-year, the 50-year choices we make in designing our community that a bus route can't fix. I know that, I used to do your job. I mean, we're speaking the same thing, but a bus route can't fix something in a week that we haven't planned for the last 40 years. So I think that's where my head goes.
I'm also thinking about the school district, and Candace mentioned the boundary. I had Lincoln in mind as many of you were talking. If you're familiar with our school district, Lincoln sits on top of the hill, and its boundaries come all the way to the downtown area. And I've worked with many families, many parents who have small children, lots of single-parent households, usually a mother. And in January, she is not willing to get her small children out of bed to make the walk up to Lincoln, which is about 1.8 miles sometimes, and we do not have to transport under the 2-mile radius for K to 8, 3-mile radius for 9 through 12. And that presents barriers in many, many ways. And when I think of the inequality of that, it disproportionately hits our families in poverty. When our families in poverty maybe have a single car and somebody works, our school schedules are staggered so that our yellow buses can be efficient and get our kids to school. But if you don't qualify for a bus ride, if you're within those boundaries, and you have to have your high school or middle student to school by 7:30, and our elementary start anywhere between about 8 o'clock and about 9:30, that's a big spread. And if you have to get to work in the meantime and you have one car, it's very, very challenging. Another thing that we often hear, and I'm thinking now of the workforce, which I've heard some of you address, our high school age students, we are often trying to get them into internships, job shadows. We're trying to get them career and college ready, and they can't get to work. Maybe their beginning job is on the West End, they live down here. We are so fortunate in Dubuque that the Jewel provides free transportation to our students, but again, limited hours is a barrier, and the bus has to be close to where they want to go. So that is not necessarily the case for our families that are a little bit more affluent. Somebody can always get them to their job, somebody can pick them up, maybe a neighbor or grandparents, but many of our families who live in poverty do not have that luxury.
And Shirley, those issues that you've mentioned, are those things that the school district is actively talking about trying to figure out solutions to, or where do some of those answers lie, do you think?
We are in constant conversation with our schools and our families, and we know that it's larger than us. It is a community issue as well. It's where is city housing, where do our families live? And yes, we are working with our families, trying to come up with creative solutions and really trying everything we can to help them get their children to school on time.
Let me invite Ryan to jump in, because it seems like you're the problem, okay, and the solution. So can you talk about some of the things that you are doing, one, to work with the school districts to get kids to school on time, but also from the employer perspective, what are you guys doing creatively to help families get to work?
So Ryan Nucky, City of Dubuque Transportation Department. Been here 18 months. When I came to the city, it was like drinking from a fire hose. People are asking questions. Where are you going to start? What are you going to do? I literally took a step back and said, it'll come to me. It's going to pose itself really fast. What's the biggest thing? And Shirley, she gave me a call. Hey, we have a problem. How do we get these kids to school? So we set up a meeting with Shirley and Jody Johnson, my transit supervisor, sat down, started talking, and said, Shirley, what's our issue? And she said, all these kids can't get to school. And my big question, and my department knows this, is, well, why? What's the issue? What is the impeding factor? And it was literally, they couldn't get bus passes. They couldn't get the cards. I'm like, that is a very simple fix. So we took down the information. We said, we'll get back to you in a week. Within that week, we built an online application. We gave schools the bus cards. So when a student came into school, if they didn't have a bus card now, they literally went to the office. They could fill out an application, hand them a bus card that they could use that day, and we could move forward. And when we started doing that, we started with about 300 kids with bus passes, and now we're up over 900 students with bus passes.
Wow.
So very fast transition. But it came down to just figuring out, well, what's the problem? Why can't we do this? Of course, there's always supply chains issues and stuff like that. But we're telling our drivers, hey, school kids, get on the bus. You know, we want them to ride the bus. We want them to get to and from school, because if they're going to school, they're learning and they're progressing themselves. I have Andy here to my right. What's my next big thing? John Deere reaches out. Hey, we can't get people to work. How do we get them to work? How do we get new hires here that don't have transportation? These things don't fall into my lap, but sometimes they just kind of rear their head and they say, okay, let's fix it. So I had a conversation with John Deere. Mark Dickinson was sat in the meeting. Andy was there. Their team was there. Sat down and said, well, what's our issue? How can we help? With that, Jody Johnson and I went back, scratched our heads for a little bit, and then we came up with, well, we need an early morning route to get people to employees. And not only John Deere, but the rest of Dubuque also. So, of course, we told John Deere it's going to take us a couple weeks to get this figured out. We got to figure out funding because nothing's free. So we sat down and we went through a process, and that's where we came up with the AM/PM commuter route. None of our bus drivers were excited to hear that this shift starts at 4:45 in the morning, but when we started it, they were very, very excited to see people are utilizing it. We have people that don't have transportation that are physically getting on our bus at 5:15 in the morning to get to their 6 a.m. shift. With that, we didn't know what it would do the first week. Rick Dickinson and the GDDC looked at me and said, how many people are you going to get? I said, well, I'll know after the first day, I guess. To date, we've had about 350 people utilize the service. We have consistent people that use it every day, but I want to echo what Andy said. We have people that have been on this route and used it for a month, and then all of a sudden we don't see them anymore. Well, within that month, they were able to either save up enough money to buy a car, so then they could transport themselves, or B, they found another person that lives right next to them, a street away, and they carpool to work. Fantastic. My job was to get them to work. Now they've found their own ways to get to work, so now we can keep looking at, well, what's the next steps? And with this, I'll echo on that a little bit. I can't thank the GDDC enough. Nick has put us in front of a lot of HR teams so that we can start gathering more information on how do we utilize this bus service even more. How do we get to more areas, and where do we have to be? Not only, I can run a bus down any street in Dubuque, but if it's not going to be beneficial, we don't want to do it. So us getting the data from the HR teams on where their new employees are coming from, what demographics and parts of the town really help us out.
Is there a cost to that? Oh, clap. Is there a cost to the employer or the person riding the bus to participate in this?
So with that, again, the GDDC has been such a big help to it. They were able to donate $15,000 to the Jewel to help that. The Jewel, with the extra infrastructure funding over the next 5 years, was able to cover the other costs. So it's a free service morning and night for people to ride.
Andy, talk a little bit about it from your perspective. What are you seeing, and where would you like to see the program grow?
Well, to Ryan's point, we do have a few riders every morning and afternoon that take advantage of the service, not just John Deere, but Hodge, who has a facility out there also, which is great. So shortly after we launched in January, to try to get feedback from the employees, we had a focus group that came in. Ryan and Jody joined, and some of the feedback that we had there was, it's great that we're targeting people that are in the city where the bus goes, but if you think about the outlying communities, Zwingle, people that drive in from distances, that's where they said if you had something on the south end that could pick up people in Key West and drive us through the city, you've got another group that you could target that you maybe didn't think of. So, talking with Ryan this evening, that's something that they're working through right now, and hopefully later this spring, summer, that'll be kind of an expansion to it that, again, targets a different group that I think will really take advantage of it, and it'll be a benefit for them.
One of the things that I continue to hear in this community is that we're resource rich, but people poor. And so there's a lot of things that are going on, but we have to make sure those who need it the most have access to this information. So all of you are ambassadors now. Now that you know, go and tell someone. But we have a lot of questions, and I want to make sure I try to get to most of them. The first one is about the stigma of transportation, that it's only for the poor. How do we begin to normalize that transportation is for everyone? And my apologies. So anyone can tackle that transportation is for everyone, students, adults, able. Not.
I guess maybe I can start this again, maybe with my earlier comment. What does it look like in the future if you've been to bigger cities, if you've been to Europe, where the cities, it's designed where it accommodates everybody. And I don't know how you get to that point in a city like Dubuque, but you know, as I live out in the Asbury area where you have no option but to drive in. And so if there's some way that as we expand, we grow, as we look at the infrastructure within the cities, to have that as part of the plan where it's just it's accessible, it's timely, it's there for you. I think it will grow where it's not just looked at as, hey, that's something that someone in poverty, you know, gets on and rides, that it makes sense for all of us to take advantage of.
Yes, well, I think it needs to be expanded, as his name, Andy, was saying, that it does need to be expanded to outside of just the downtown, but also the access of information. I think that's one of the biggest issues as well, just to know where to get these resources, because a lot of people do not know that this system is out there, or that there's actually buses that go outside of the city, and people need to know this, and that's why people lack the information and sometimes go out the harder route, which didn't know that there was an easier route of going about it. So I think just building more awareness towards the problem of transportation, and make it a community issue, not just individual issue, because that's what it feels like. It's like this individual has an issue, but not many people around them know about it. And it's like, well, if you need to go grocery shopping, I could take you and just be that neighbor.
I think the research says that most people will not ride a bus unless it comes every 15 minutes. So the average person won't do it without frequency. So I think to like make it more attractive, it has to come more often. It has to be, you have to be able to miss a bus, but not be late where you're going. And so that's one thing that I think would make it more attractive to more people, is just increased frequency, and then maybe with that some increased geographic reach. But that frequency is the key, and that's what is found all the time when it's studied. Is it has to come more often so that you can miss one and still get where you want to go on time. And that's not the case. If you have an office job and there's no flexibility, if you have a manufacturing job and there's no flexibility, you miss that bus, you're done for, and you're not going to get there. So I think that's a huge piece to making it attractive to more people.
Yeah, and Ryan, maybe you can speak to that a little bit. How realistic is it for Dubuque to develop the kind of robust system that Candace is talking about to be able to have that kind of frequency and reach? I mean, bus ridership has been going the other direction from, over the decades, right? So maybe speak to that. And we can't have, the Jewel's not going to solve all our problems, but is there some room to grow here?
I was hoping Candace was going to answer that. She posed the question.
I can probably tell you what it would cost, but.
So I don't want to, you're exactly right. Ridership took a huge dive, and the biggest part of that, and I'm going to use the word COVID, but yes, it was COVID. COVID came on, the Jewel, and I believe 2019 did about 488,000 rides. That was a very good year for the Jewel. I believe it's one of their top years ever. COVID came through, and in 21, they did about 319,000. And that's kind of where I picked it up at. I'm like, okay, we took a huge hit here. Not only do we take a hit in ridership, but that costs us revenue right there. It's not the rides we receive, it's the FTA funding that we're also looking at too, because FTA looks at what is your ridership and how you're going to move forward. So this is where we started from zero and said, okay, we have to get riders back on the bus. How are we going to do it? It's a totally different demographic though now. Like the slide showed, a lot of people are working from home. They used to use the bus. I believe 3% to 8% that work from home now. So that's where we're looking at how do we get more students on our bus and utilize that more. And not only are we working with the students just going to school, we've had a lot of conversations with after-school programs and on that side. That's why we're starting the early AM commuter route to see how we can increase ridership on that side. A big portion of this does come down to funding, though, because every year the Jewel receives so much funding, and we can only implement so many new things. I do want to stress this. Since I've been at the city council's done a fantastic job at giving us funds to replace our buses. I do want to go back to the original question. With that, nobody wants to ride on an old bus. When I came to the Jewel, they've done a very good job at keeping stuff cleaned up and running. And when you get on the buses, you don't hear the rattling. You don't hear the issues, the squeaks, the issue on most of the roads. How do we make that better? Because the only way we're going to get more different equity and inclusion on the buses is if people feel safe and they're clean to use. So at the Jewel, what we're definitely looking at, and especially through COVID, how do we keep them cleaner on the inside? But not only that, how do we get newer equipment? And I think the city has done a fantastic job at putting money towards new equipment every year to keep it updated so we don't fall into a pattern where we have older equipment that we're utilizing. Well, another issue on the bus is safety. People don't ride the buses if they're not safe. And God bless my drivers that drive between 2:30 and 4 o'clock every day when the school kids are getting out. On the way to school, they ride the bus fantastic. They're all tired in the morning. They're very good riders. But at 2:30 when they get out of school, it's go time. It's,
hey, you watch it there. Those are my kids now.
I'm just telling you, it's go time. They're ready to go. I have some fantastic drivers that keep them in check, make sure that they're safe on the buses. But that's where we were having some issues with fights on the bus, and it happens. They're junior high kids and elementary kids. So again, I said, well, why are we having the fights? What's causing it, and how do we fix it? Again, we reached out to the school system, said, hey, what can we do here? But we eventually reached out to our police department and worked with the SRO teams at the schools. And now that when we have issues, we're not going to the school system, we're going to the SRO teams. And they're saying, oh, I know that student, I'm going to talk to him tomorrow, we're going to talk through this issue, and we're going to let them know that there's consequences if there are issues riding on the bus. Because the safer I can keep the buses, the more students I'll keep riding the buses, and it'll be a safer event for everybody.
And the SROs are designed to build community with the students. They're not there to right away arrest or put kids in handcuffs. They're specifically in the schools, building relationships.
The school resource officers,
correct.
if you're not familiar with that.
Right. Shirley, I want to throw you in there. There's a few questions about what is the school doing for students who are outside of that 2-mile radius. Are we doing anything creative to get them to school?
Sure. Any students who are out of the 2-mile radius qualify for a school bus ride. And so we have regular routes, but what we find is when students get to the high school age, much as the city demographics show, a lot of them have a vehicle and they choose to come to school with their friends, carpool, or our parking lots. If you've ever been to our high schools through the day, you can't get into the lots. There's not a place to park. So we have a lot of students that do drive to school. Also, we have special populations, special education students. We have individualized education programming teams that come around each student and look at their need. Some of our students qualify for transportation within the 2-mile radius because of special education needs. And so we have buses that pick up those students from their doorstep, deliver them to the front door of our schools. We also have a population of students that's called McKinney-Vento. And the McKinney-Vento Act is for students who are classified as homeless. And it's not the HUD definition, it is a school district definition, which says they lack a fixed, adequate nighttime shelter. And so the students who move around schools because they have to find a place to live, so they're doubled up most of the time. Sometimes they're in shelters, sometimes they're in motels. Now that the weather's nice, we will have families living in cars and campgrounds all over the place. And so we do provide transportation, and that's federal law. But again, kind of the caveat with that is the federal law reads that if students are not eligible, like every other student, then we don't have to transport. So we get back to the issue of that 2 to 3 mile boundaries. We do not provide transportation within those boundaries routinely, so we don't have to provide McKinney-Vento transportation within those boundaries. But again, we look at each circumstance individually, each family, and sometimes we do. And I just wanted to publicly thank Ryan for all of his work with the Jewel system. It's been tremendous help to our school district. We do have a lot of students that ride it. And one of the things that we do, we have a lot of, we call them school connectors, life coaches. And they often will meet students and get on the bus and teach them how to ride the system. In addition to our SROs, we have principals sometimes that get on the bus to help remind their children of what their behavior norms are. So it takes a village on that one to be able to get our students on and safely to school, so your drivers can drive and our students can ride. And I might add, we face those same challenges on our yellow school buses as well.
This is a question from the audience, and we've touched on this a little bit, but I'll throw it out there in case somebody has something to add. For our workforce, routed service isn't always a viable solution. So how can public and private partners support other solutions? Anybody have an example of that?
Well, I think this kind of goes back to the last question, that it's not any one solution to figure this out. It's not, Jules, not the magic bullet, but we are a smart community. We are collecting data to learn more about how people move around and when they need to move. And then we have this collection of options. Do-ride model is here. We've got Uber happening. We've got buses. We've got different modes of transportation. Parking plays a huge role in that. Infrastructure is expensive. So how do those things come together? A 500 space ramp that costs $20 million to build, if the thing lasts 50 years, it's going to cost $67 per month per space. $67 per month per space if that ramp lasts 50 years. We do need parking, but how do we more smartly deploy some of these things? And I'm heartened to see that the city working to use data to make better and smarter decisions for our residents and taxpayers too.
My next question that somebody gave us was about how does data collection really help in the transportation mix and play a role in public transit? So you killed two birds there, Dave.
Yeah, we need to know how people are moving around. We need to know where people are parking. We need to know how often they're spending in a space. So we have workers, we have residents, and we have visitors. Is certain parking areas, are they more tailored to the workers, and so they're vacant 2/3 of the time? That's wasting resources.
And
so we're smarter than that.
Yeah, we've seen the city make decisions about parking based on data, and it changed over time. As you noted, after the pandemic, we had to reevaluate a lot of that data because so much changed.
I give the city a lot of credit for revisiting in Heartland and Cottingham, Butler, to say, hey, how do we look at this in a smarter way? So, for example, at our Dubuque development agreement, every year we look at available off-street parking, and if at any point it reaches 85% of capacity, then we have a conversation. Then we have a conversation about smart mobility and how do we address those issues in a cohesive way.
So maybe just to build on what he said there in terms of data, and I think always looking ahead. So when we put together our bus service working with Ryan, we did a survey, and we asked our employees, and now granted it wasn't everybody. We've got close to 3,000 people out at John Deere, but those that did respond, over 25% said they would consider public transportation. And I think someone made the point of every 15 minutes, or what would they be willing to ride on the bus. I think it was 30 minutes was that sweet spot. So the interest is there. And I think trying to have something set up that can address the people's needs, that as we talk through this, something that looks right, it's just a matter, I think, of finding the right formula that fits. But for sure, the interest is there, and I think people are definitely willing to take advantage of it.
I do want to hear Candace say something before I ask my question.
Okay. I think Dave hit something that I think about a lot, which is we don't think about it as a network and something where there are trade-offs. So, for example, if the bus system can go every 15 minutes, do we need a $20 million parking ramp? Can that money be used to boost the transit system? So if we think about that each person is going to move to work in some way, and we have a fixed amount of money we're willing to spend, we just have to think about the different ways they might get there, and maybe it's worth investing in some really sweet off-road bike trails that go to major employers. And investing in some really rapid transit systems and not think about everybody's going to drive their car alone into this one spot. Maybe if we spend that money in a different way, we can get some different results. So I think that's something I think about. When you brought up the ramp, I always forget about it somehow. But that's money that was on the table at one point, and can we look at how that could be spent a different way if it's not needed anymore in that way?
I want to hear you talk a little bit more about the walkability of the community. You know, I tend to think of the city's network of biking and walking trails as a wonderful amenity and a recreation. I don't think about it as transportation. Should we be looking at it that way? Is it? Can it be?
I think so. Obviously, I use it all the time for that, and I think a lot of people do. I mean, Amy, you rode your bike to the pool, right?
You bet.
It was transportation when you were a kid. It
sure was.
You just don't think about it when you're a grown up. I mean, that's part of it. We think when we're grown ups, we think we need to use our cars. We don't. We don't have to use our cars. We can do other things. It's actually great for our bodies. It's great for our wallets. There's a lot of reasons why we can do those things. If we would send our kid out to do it, boom, like, why can't we? But I do think, which this goes back really a long time, but when we did the Safe Routes to School surveys, it's been 15 years now, but we did them, and a lot of the parent feedback was not about the safety of their kid being abducted. It was about the intersections near the schools not being safe, or them not feeling that their kid was going to have a safe path to school. So I think thinking about sidewalks and biking and getting around our community in a non-car mode has to be focused on thinking about those paths, those sidewalks, as if we would use them, not just something that is there. So there's lots of intersections where we would benefit from changes, from speed limit changes, from different engineering methods, techniques that exist to slow down traffic, to make you feel safer as a pedestrian. So I think that's how we can make it feel like more of a system. Because when we look at a road and we think about fixing it, we don't ever think about, like, oh, should we also check out that curb? Should we also make sure that curb is out a little bit further so a kid can be seen when they're crossing? We don't. We just think about, can that car go where they need to go at their 35 miles an hour? We don't think about it holistically, and I like to try to go back to that. Like, we're very much a single occupant vehicle mindset, and when we think that way, we build that way, and then we don't build for the kids on their bikes, which you can still be a kid on your bike, Amy, and go places, right? It's just, we don't think about it that way as a holistic approach. I hope that answered that question.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I do want to echo a couple of the comments that were brought up. I'm going to switch hats right now and go to the parking world. In the parking world, we're doing the Smart Parking Mobility Management Plan. We have Walker Consultants, RDG is also helping them out, Bolton and Mink. And when I came to the city, I'm like, well, we need new parking technology. I mean, a lot of this stuff it's dinosaur age, it's obsolete. We don't even have support teams to help us with it. So I'm like, okay, we need to look at a different parking structure. But I was very fortunate to work with Steve Sampson-Brown from the city engineering department. And when we wrote the RFP, we didn't look at just the parking technology. We looked at the mobility side also. As far as moving forward with this project right now, we're collecting a lot of that data that you guys are talking about. The consultants and some city team members, they did a bike ride throughout city, and they stopped and took pictures and said, this isn't safe, we need to look at this for different reasons. They looked at walkability. On a lot of the questionnaires, it was how far would you walk if you parked your car, and how far would you walk if you had an app that would tell you where to park the car. So a lot of these things are being discussed currently in my other department. On the mobility side, we're calling them themes right now. As far as, I don't have funding to fix them yet, but they're themes that we're going to look at and definitely hopefully get in front of the city council to say, hey, these were things that we found when we did the study throughout the city. These are things that we need to look at as we move into next year's fiscal budget. But I also want to go back to Dave's comment about the parking ramps. When I came to the city, it was, oh my gosh, these parking ramps are full. And then I do a drive, and I'm like, well, they don't look very full today, but it's kind of how the structure is built, and we've been very fortunate to work with some of the bigger businesses downtown and kind of talk to them about, hey, you're running a hybrid system right now, so do you really need X amount of parking spots, or do you want a different solution? And they've sat down with RDG Consulting and kind of explain to them what they're looking for future state. So as we look at new technology, we're able to incorporate that into it. I'm not saying it's going to be a 100% fix all, but it's definitely going to be a major improvement from what we have today.
You know, I think one of the were you going to say something too? My apologies. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna add on something that Candace said, where she was saying that yes, people are getting to work and we're fixing that problem and that's being fixed, but there's also like other areas where the slack could be picked up. Like, okay, if these people cannot get to work, then how do they get everywhere else they need to be? So I think that just goes back to why the surveys is so important to research and do all this, gather all this data, because what if we need to go past routes to grocery stores or nearby hospitals and clinics, so people do not have these issues and could get where they need to be faster and not have to wait on depend on someone else's time and be on their own schedule.
And I think that's a segue for me to say, you know, especially when we do the data walk through the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque, and we talk about, well, how is that data going to be used to make informed decisions? This is when each and every single one of us come together and say, what's our role? And lock arms as institutions to make sure that it is safe, it's accessible, affordable, and it's part of our culture. And as we plan to go to goal setting in the next few weeks, months, I'm just curious from each person, what does an equitable transportation community look like? So as Ryan's planning on to prepare us for goal setting, he's writing some notes down. Give us 2 to 3 words. What does that look like for you in 2 to 3 words?
I think it means not having to worry about it, like looking for a job and not necessarily having to think like, well, is this gonna fit in my schedule and how long is it gonna take me to get there? Or is it an actual sustainable transportation resource that I can get to it when I need to? I think that's where my head goes.
Anybody else? An equitable transportation.
To me, it means everyone is able to get where they need or want to be in a timely manner.
Rock, paper, scissors.
2 or 3 words? Is that the instruction?
I'll give you some extra ones.
Wow.
You can break the rules.
I think that's a really great question that we must define as a community. And I think it's people have equal opportunity no matter what mode they choose.
Is there a word limit?
No, go ahead.
I mean, no, I will try to meet your word limit, Anderson.
I said 3, but you know what? I'm feeling a little free today.
I got 5.
Okay.
5.
Okay. Maybe. I don't know if it's even going to make sense if I try to do it with 5, but I'm going to try real hard. I think I would say that it is a network or a transportation system. Transportation system is part of your thing.
Okay.
So transportation system where you can grow up and grow old independently.
I
Wow.
like that one.
I think that's what I
Pretty
would
good
say.
with 5 words.
I like that one.
So I look at it from the operations side. Frequency, reliability, and financially stable. Because I love the ideas, and I really do. We just have to be able to financially fund it. And right now, our Jewel team's doing an amazing job. Like I said, we're going to go up another almost 40,000 riders this year, which is amazing, and we're excited about it. So I am taking notes if you're asking questions about that, but these questions are greatly helping me build what we're looking at for goal setting coming up.
So I recently had a chance to visit an Amazon distribution warehouse. And their motto is when to get stuff out, it's got to be glance, speed, fast, meaning you see it and you know it'll be there in the day or 2 afterwards. And I think maybe looking at transportation Dubuque, maybe car speed fast. So, so if I want to take my car, maybe plus or minus a few minutes if I can get on the bus or something that's maybe equitable or the same. So something of that nature where car or bus or whatever it might be, kind of meets the same need.
education system.
One more thing, Dave.
You said 5. You said 5. You're cheating.
I guess I just realized nobody mentioned the 15-minute city concept, which is all about people being able to go 15 minutes and get where they need to be. So if it's with a car, it's a little bit further. If it's walking, it's not as far. Like, so the 15-minute city is a concept we have not talked about, but I don't think there's time for it either, probably. But worth like some probably thinking about as a community, thinking about like where people live and where they need to go, and can we kind of cluster it a little bit more instead of industrial over there and retail over there and medical over here and housing right here, and then just making everybody go to all those things instead of thinking about like what do you need in your immediate surroundings. So I think it's probably a 15-minute city might be another equitable transportation network. Anderson.
I was just going to say, I biked here in 5 minutes, so that was faster than a car because I would have had to walk out, go to my car in a parking ramp, come out, drive down here, find parking. So, yeah, just for what it's worth.
Dave wins.
Well, I was just going to add one more thing. I think we're looking at transportation locally as well, but I think something really important is how to get to Dubuque in general. When you travel, how do you travel? You have to travel 3 hours, hour and a half in a car, and that's if you have a car. And if not, you take a 6 to 8 hour bus drive outside of the city and then get on a plane for 3 hours, and you end up traveling 18 hours, which is not great, which is something I did over this weekend twice, and I'm still recovering from it. So, so it does affect student achievement because some professors don't understand. Like, I have to also prepare to go travel, come back, and I have to take an exam after I just traveled 18 hours. So it's an issue, and it's an issue for families as well. If you have small children, do you really want to travel outside of Dubuque? And people need that sometimes just to get out and explore. And if we also want to make Dubuque something bigger, the masterpiece of the Mississippi, they need to be able to get to the masterpiece of the Mississippi. So,
Well said.
Thank you.
This is a great panel because you're all really engaged around this topic, and you've all got so much to add, and I really appreciate that. We try to leave some time at the end of these events because folks might want to just talk to some of us one-on-one, have some conversations amongst yourselves. So if there's something that you just didn't get in and you can't wait, you can have one last comment here. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to Bob, and he'll kind of wrap us up.
Any final words?
2 to 3.
Not 5.
Okay, thank you so much. Please thank our panelists.
I have one follow-up question, and we started to address it. And this is maybe for you, Shirley, but it could be for anybody on the panel. Any thoughts on how we can address, and we talked about do-ride a little bit, any thoughts on how we can address transportation specifically for elementary kids who are inside the 2-mile radius that may or may not involve public transportation, or it could be something new and different, do-ride-ish, or something like that. Any thoughts on that?
Can I go before Shirley, please?
Absolutely. Anybody?
A huge shout out to the Dubuque Community School District. With the closure of the Fulton School, those students are going down to Prescott. So when that was happening, they reached out to the Jewel and said, hey, how are we going to do this? And at the time, Jody Johnson and I look at each other and said, well, let's figure out a way to do this. So we kind of pondered a couple ideas, and we reached back out to the school district and said, they can get on our bus. We can let all these kids on our bus, and kids ride for free, so it's not a financial reason. And the school district said, well, we'll just put a para on the bus. So at the time, we're thinking, okay, we're going to have a driver with all these little kids, but the school's going to put a para on the bus to help to keep the kids kind of calm and where they need to be. And we do it every day. It works every day. Every day you'll see a line of kids get off right down the road from Prescott, walk down to the school. So every year I really enjoy working with the school district on what's another thing that we can look at and how do we address it and fix that. Sorry, Shirley. Thank you very much, though, Shirley.
Thanks, Sharon.
He answered my question. I was going to talk about how wonderful it is.
All right.
And of course, we're still working, trying to get stops around Lincoln, because that's kind of the last elementary school that we don't have figured out. But we are trying to be creative. I know a bit earlier I was talking to someone. We tried walking school buses 10, 15 years ago. And one of our principals was so dedicated. For 2 weeks, she had paras out there, called parents, talked to kids, and not a single student joined our walking school bus. But I think it's an idea after COVID, as you know, we really encourage people to get back out, talk to their neighbors, have kids come to school. It's an idea we can try again. They have such cute things like caterpillars and, you know, these little umbrella things that kids could grab a hold of and do fun games on the way to school. So we're really exploring lots of the walkability things within the 2 miles. And of course, they work well on weeks like this, not so well in January, but we'll take what we can get weather-wise.
Yeah. Great. Ryan, Shirley, thanks. Help me thank this panel again one more time, please. Andy, Ryan, Melissa, Dave, Candace, and Shirley. Okay, so here are some of the takeaways that I heard, and you might have gotten these or some other ones as well. I heard that from the data that we have about 8%, almost 1 in 10 people have fewer vehicles than they have workers, and there's a challenge in getting to work. We also saw that about 8% are taking public transportation, especially in the Black and I think Latino, Black and Asian populations in Dubuque. And, you know, we heard also that we need to make this, as an employer, if you're a business owner or a manager, we need to make this about the employee experience, not just about parking. What does it mean to get to work, and how can we facilitate that? How can we make it easier to bike, walk, and bus, and how can we make it less expensive to bike, walk, and bus? And we saw how one company, Dubuque, is doing that down in the Millwork District. We talked about making it more equitable, again, easier, less expensive. The school boundaries, we talked a little bit about that and potentially some solutions there. I did not know, it was great to hear about the online application for bus cards that was implemented by Ryan and his team. And also the early morning commuter route that was also implemented is also a great creative way, an open-minded way to address some of these issues. And I also like the idea of going to those outlying communities and trying to expand it to, again, Key West, Zwingle, and others. You know, we also heard about the fact that we need to get more information out there. So how can media companies like ours and others help spread the word in terms of some of the opportunities that are out there? I love this phrase, make this a community issue, not an individual issue. And I think that that is something that we can all work on as we have conversations about this in the future. So we talked about the 2 mile thing, and I know that we have solutions in place for special needs and the homeless, and you used the word I couldn't remember or write down, Shirley, but I'll get it from you later. Some other takeaways that I had written down here. This is one of my favorites. That the problem is never just one thing, and the solution is never just one thing. So there's not one solution. It is a network, and there are trade-offs. There are different resources that are available. We can't do everything. So how do we prioritize these? One of the answers is data, and I applaud the people who are doing surveys and focus groups and other and studies to help compile that data, especially in a changing world like we're in today. Talked about making intersections safer and not thinking about this just as a one-person car rider environment when we're planning our transportation options and upgrades. We talked about what is equitable and equal opportunity no matter what mode you choose was one we heard. A network or system where you can grow up and grow old independently was another that we heard, and get where you want to go when you want to get there, possibly in as few as 15 minutes. One of the things that came up also is that I think Nancy mentioned this a second ago, and I don't know if this is a thing or not, but it seems like there could be potential funding constraints from some governmental agencies at the national level or others where, and I don't know if you want to comment on this, Ryan, but where they're maybe more likely to fund traditional bus-type systems and maybe less likely to fund non-traditional systems like a do-ride or alternatives to those. Is that a fair assessment, or is that an assumption on my part?
There's different ways to fund the different projects.
Okay.
Right now, with the infrastructure bill that came out, we're trying to utilize everything we can. And again, I want to thank the City Council for approving the budget where they're allowing me to do a lot more grant writing this year. That's a huge thing. We've already put 3 grants out. We just received a CDL training grant, which is very much going to help us. But as far as different grants, we're applying for the Low-No grant right now. That'd be for new buses, new electric buses to come to the city. We've also applied for a planning grant. That grant is going to, if we get it, we haven't got it yet, but it would allow us to do a study of what we currently have and how do we improve it to make it more mobile for people that want to walk, ride bikes, etc.
Great. Good to know. Thank you for clarifying that. And last we heard, it's not just about getting around Dubuque, it's getting to and from Dubuque for a lot of people. So some great takeaways there. Again, thank the panel for sharing all of those. I want to next mention that we're going to have some community conversations on this topic. On the tables in front of you, you will find some flyers that talk about those community conversations. This is opportunity for you to get involved and share your thoughts on a more direct level. Those are being facilitated by the Community Foundation. So take a look at the sheet and please participate in some of those. I'd also like to thank our sponsors one more time, and especially tonight, John Deere for being our lead sponsor. So please help me thank all of our sponsors. Mark, thanks for kicking us off tonight. Lastly, I'd like to thank Steeple Square for hosting this 7th in our 7-part series. And I don't want to forget to thank and appreciate and recognize the people at the TH Media video team. We're doing live streaming tonight, and this is also recorded. Best video crew within the 50-mile radius, I think, and they do a phenomenal job, and not only for us, but for all of our advertisers and partners. So with that, you are invited to stick around. Don't forget, May 24th, we'll be having a final wrap-up where we put all of these things together, the takeaways from all 7 series. There's also going to be a data walk involved. We'll be partnering with the Community Foundation. Location and time to be determined, but think 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on Wednesday, May 24th, and we'll keep you posted on that. With that, I would invite you to stick around, have further conversations. The beverages are still open, and there might be even some chips and salsa available. Yes, there are. So thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate that, and have a great evening.
All the sweat's coming out of your head now.
What do you mean?
Hey, thanks for coming.
Here, I'll give you your mic.
Oh.
So don't forget it. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Thanks, Ryan.